I was standing at the door of my children's room, 4 years old, twins, sleeping, and I was thinking, how many more times will I be able to do this? How much life do I still have left? 3 days earlier, the doctor had given me a diagnosis that I knew better than anyone should know. I am a psychologist. I have read hundreds of articles about this disease. I knew every stage, every detail, every line of the survival statistics. ALS, Amyotrophic Lateral Sclerosis, a disease that destroys the neurons responsible for body movement. It starts too discreetly. A small tremor in the hand, a strange fatigue in the legs, a strange difficulty in holding simple objects, things that anyone would ignore on a busy day. But I didn't ignore it, because I knew what was coming next. Weakness advances. The muscles stop responding one by one. Walking becomes a risk. Speech gradually fades away like a radio signal losing frequency. Swallowing becomes a conscious effort. And then the whole body stops, but the mind continues, completely lucid, completely awake, trapped in a body that has become a prison of flesh and bone. There is no cure. I knew that better than anyone. And that week after the diagnosis, I started standing at the door of my children's room every night, trying to record every detail in my memory. The way they slept, their breathing in the dark, the little noise one of them made when dreaming, because I had already accepted it. I wouldn't see them grow up. I slowly closed the door that night. I went to the kitchen. I drank water. I looked at my hands, already trembling longer than usual, and I went to work, because it was the only place where I still felt whole. The only place where I still controlled something. I spent 23 years as a psychologist dismantling people's faith, not out of cruelty, out of absolute conviction. I believed with every neuron I had that faith was just the brain trying to survive the fear of death, a defense mechanism, an illusion that human beings created to avoid going insane in the face of the end. Miracles, spontaneous remissions of poorly explained diseases, misdiagnoses, sophisticated placebo effects, nothing more than that. I had studies, data, absolute certainty. But that Friday, at 9 o'clock, a woman named Helena walked into my office. And in less than 10 minutes, she knew things about me that I had never told anyone. Not even my wife, not even my therapist, not even God, especially not God. My secretary, Juliana, announced over the intercom, "Dr. Miguel, the patient has arrived." She entered, accompanied by a man. He appeared to be just over 30 years old. Her son, I assumed. He stayed in the reception area while she walked through the door of the office. She was a woman with a serene demeanor. Nothing extravagant in appearance, nothing that justified the immediate discomfort I felt when she looked at me. It wasn't fear, it was something else. It was the feeling that she already knew something I had yet to realize. She sat down. She said her name. "Helena," I began as I always did, firm posture, controlled voice, stopwatch in my head. "What brought you here?" She looked at me for a few seconds before responding. No rush, no nervousness. "I came to talk about faith. I have watched many of your lectures, Doctor. You argue that faith does not exist, that God does not exist. But I need to ask you one thing." She paused. "Is it that God does not exist? Or did you lose faith when you decided to abandon it?" My stomach tightened. I kept my face neutral. It's a technique I have been practicing for years. But inside, something had shifted. I responded in the most clinical tone I could muster. "Did you come here to be analyzed or to analyze me?" "Today, both things can be the same," she said. I took a deep breath and tried to regain control of the session. Faith, from a clinical point of view, is a cognitive mechanism. The human brain creates meanings when facing the fear of the end. Miracles are emotional interpretations of biological phenomena that we do not yet fully understand. We listen to everything without blinking. So you believe that only what can be measured exists. I believe in what can be proven. "And who measures love, Doctor?" I didn't like the question. Love is a neurochemical response associated with survival and social bonding. She smiled, not with irony, with a patience that completely disarmed me. "You have studied the human mind your whole life, but you have never studied a mother's heart. The silence that came after that sentence was different from the other silences. I felt it. I tried to ignore it. "Let's keep the clinical focus," I said, and that's when she said something that changed the tone of everything. "Today you are more vulnerable than you realize, doctor. Vulnerability is not a clinical diagnosis. Fear is," she replied. I clenched my jaw. "You are afraid of not seeing your children grow up." The air left my lungs. I had never mentioned my children. I had never spoken about the diagnosis to anyone other than my wife. How did she know? I needed to regain control. I took a deep breath. I calmly crossed my hands over my legs. "You are making assumptions based on my age and family context. It's a known technique. Cold reading. Emotional manipulation disguised as intuition." He didn't move. "You stand at their bedroom door at night, doctor, I know." My breath faltered. It wasn't a visible tremor. It was internal, the kind of thing that only someone who studies the human body can identify in themselves. I do. Every night, since the diagnosis. But it was impossible for her to know that. "You are crossing ethical boundaries," I said with a voice firmer than I felt inside. "You are bringing my personal life into this consultation. Please, let's stop." She continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "You promised, when you lost your mother, that you would never depend on God again." My hand trembled on the table. That wasn't cold reading. That was something else. This part of my life no one knew, absolutely no one. It was a promise made in silence, alone, in a hospital room, holding a hand that was already cold. A promise I had never verbalized to any human being on the face of the earth. "How do you know that?" I asked. For the first time in 23 years of practice, I asked a question I didn't know how to answer before asking it. She leaned slightly forward. "You don't hate faith because of theology. You reject it because you felt abandoned." The anger that came wasn't explosive. It was the worst kind of anger, the silent one, the kind that realizes it is being read by someone who shouldn't have access to anything. "Miracles don't exist," I said, more to myself than to her. "What if the miracle is you?" she replied softly. The clock on the wall read 21 hours and 40 minutes. At least that's what I saw. She continued speaking, and each word came with a surgical precision that I couldn't block with any of my clinical defenses. "You've read every article about your condition. You know the average progression time. You know when speech starts to fail. You know when the hands stop obeying." My throat completely dried up. "That's speculation," I murmured. She looked at me with a calmness that wasn't human and said only this: "Trust. I take care of my children." A wave of heat surged up my spine to the back of my neck. I couldn't speak. She slowly got up. The consultation was over, or so I thought, because what I was about to discover would completely knock me off my feet. I walked her to the office door. Her son approached the reception and extended his hand to greet me. The moment our hands touched, I felt an intense warmth coursing through my fingers. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't psychological suggestion. It was physical, real, impossible to rationalize at that moment. They left. I stood in the hallway for a few seconds, trying to organize thoughts that obeyed no logic I knew. I returned to the office. I closed the door. I took a deep breath. And then I saw it. On my desk, among the papers, there was a blue rosary. Simple, small, cold to the touch. I am absolutely sure it hadn't been there before. Why would I have a rosary? I wasn't religious. I had never been. There was no plausible explanation for that object being there. Next to it, a folded note. My heart raced. I looked around. The door was closed. No one had entered. I had personally seen Helena to the exit. My secretary didn't have access to my office without notice. So who put that there? I picked up the note with trembling hands. I opened it slowly. The handwriting was firm and delicate at the same time. "My son, I know your heart was wounded in the past. I know you carry fear of the future. A mother feels her child's pain. Trust. I will take care of everything." I read it 3 times, 4 times. The part about the past hit me first. The promise I made when I lost my mother. The abandonment of faith that I had never admitted to anyone out loud. Then came the part about the future. The diagnosis, the children, the fear I had been carrying in silence for days. I went to the reception immediately. "Juliana, did you come into my room during the appointment?" She frowned. "No, doctor." "Did anyone come in?" "No. The only people who were here today were you and her companion, but as you witnessed, this appointment was super quick. I even thought it was strange." Juliana said. "What do you mean, quick appointment, Juliana?" "This appointment lasted about an hour and 30 minutes. No, Dr. Miguel, this appointment lasted 7 minutes. I felt the ground disappear." 7 minutes? "No. This appointment lasted over an hour and a half, I'm sure. I have a stopwatch in this office, Juliana. I know how long a session lasts." She looked at me carefully. "Doctor, she came in at 9 p.m. She left at 9:07. Check the cameras, now." She opened the system. Entry at 9 p.m., exit at 9:07. 7 minutes. Exactly 7 minutes. I returned to the office in silence. I looked at the rosary, at the note, at the clock on the wall, and then I accessed the cameras myself. What I saw on that screen made me sit on the floor. The reception was empty at 9 p.m., my secretary sitting alone, no lady coming in, no man waiting. I switched to the office camera. I appeared sitting in my chair, gesturing, responding, staring straight ahead with an intensity I recognized in myself. But the chair in front of me was empty. For 7 minutes, I was alone in that room, talking to nothing. My hands began to tremble in a way different from the tremors of the diagnosis. It was another kind of tremor. It was the tremor of someone who realizes that the ground they stood on their whole life does not exist. I looked at the table. The rosary was still there. The note, too. Real physical objects that I could touch, left by someone the cameras did not record. That night I went home in silence. I watched my wife in the kitchen, my children playing on the living room floor, and for the first time since the diagnosis, the word that lady had said did not sound absurd. Trust. It echoed like a real possibility. The following Saturday, we met a friend of my wife's in the park. She told us that her mother, seriously ill for months, had improved. The doctors had tried a new treatment. It had worked. "But I prayed a lot," she said, smiling. "I did a novena. I promised I would trust in God until the end." I heard that without the automatic repulsion I always felt when someone talked about faith, about God. I felt something else. Envy of her hope. At that moment, a tingling and discreet warmth ran down my neck, the same warmth from the night of the appointment. The next morning, very worried about those new symptoms I was feeling, I scheduled an emergency appointment with my neurologist. I underwent many tests: MRI, lumbar puncture, complete motor evaluation. I waited for the results with my heart in my throat. The minutes in that waiting room felt like hours. When the doctor called me into his office, his look was different. It wasn't the look of someone about to confirm a devastating diagnosis. It was another look, one I had never seen in him before. "Something happened, Miguel." I didn't say anything. "There are no signs of degeneration, no markers compatible with the disease. We redid all the tests. It's clean. The degeneration in the brain no longer shows up." "How can this be, doctor?" I murmured. He took a deep breath. "Sometimes we can't explain everything, Miguel. I really wanted to give you a logical explanation for this, but I can't. We can't explain everything." Miracle. Was he trying to say miracle? The word I had always rejected crossed my mind. The phrase I used for years to downplay miracles, now said by my doctor about me. I returned to my office with a mix of joy and gratitude. I looked at the table. The rosary was still there. The note was too. In that moment I understood. I was not being analyzed that night. I was being visited by the Virgin Mary and her son Jesus, and I was being blessed and receiving my miracle. Today I continue as a psychologist, but I no longer dismantle anyone's faith, because I know what science can explain, and I also know what it cannot erase. I was diagnosed, I was condemned, and yet I was healed. Since that Friday, when someone asks me if miracles exist, I do not respond with theories. I respond with gratitude. Thank you for listening to me today, and if you are also looking for a miracle in your life, write in the comments the phrase, "My miracle will happen." Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. May God grant your miracle. Amen.